Hey, Studio 108 Seekers and Sages. I'm here with another great episode of Following. So glad you're joining me. And I hope you subscribe, like, comment, put your ideas down below. Just really participate because we are all about community. And I've got Leah Rachelle here, and she's going to talk to us about sleep, but really it's about community. It's about sharing these topics and these ideas, coming into conversation with each other, and really supporting each other. So I'm blessed to have her. The two of us do a lot of, batting ideas back and forth, commenting on our lives, our life habits, and that helps me a lot. So we hope to share some of that with you today. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I'm down.
All right.
That's why I'm here with my laptop.
Yeah, and your hat with the two poofy little things.
Because I'm on day 3 of my hair and I haven't figured out how to revive my day 3 curls yet.
Yeah.
But I do want to get one of those silk little pillowcases that you have for over my car seat so that when I'm
Gotcha.
it doesn't make it all fuzzy and frizzy in the back. So.
Yeah, I've got to think about the car seat too.
Yeah.
Like when I had leather seats, the best thing about the leather seats is it didn't fuzz up the ends of my hair in the back. The longer it gets, the harder that
So what do you do with your hair when you sleep? Because we're talking about sleep today.
Well, I don't. It's a mess.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sleep's important.
Sleep's really important for your curls. I mean, like, what is more important than that? But yeah, sleep is super important. And it's so important to me that, like, that's the priority, not my curls.
Yeah.
So I do have a silk pillowcase, but to be honest, I usually don't use much of a pillowcase because of my neck alignment.
Well, so we know sleep's the 3rd pillar of health.
Okay.
And then from a functional medicine perspective, it's almost like sleep has to come first before the diet and the exercise. It's almost like the first pillar of health.
That's so interesting because that's not what people think. I mean, the first thing people want to talk about when they talk about health is what they eat.
So,
and then how they don't exercise, like that whole thing where we feel like no matter what activity we're doing, it's not enough.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the WHO calls sleep deprivation a carcinogen. They categorize it as that.
So define WHO for just in case we
So World Health Organization.
WHO, World Health Organization. You've heard that around, other media conversations.
I feel like we don't have to explain that.
Well, Leah, just
No, everybody knows the WHO.
This because she's not like over 50 because
no, if anything,
who was a rock band too.
Oh, so but if anything, it's like not knowing who the president is. I feel like you're insulting your listeners by having to explain that.
Gotcha.
It's like,
I'm just kind of like swooping back like a.
No, okay.
Okay.
So it decreases your natural killer cells by 70%. That's just one night of having less than 4.5 hours of sleep.
Okay, so sleep deprivation kills your what cells?
So it decreases the cells that are going to be the killer cells that are going to kind of clean up any toxin, yeah.
So your immune system really relies on quality sleep.
Yes, exactly. So there's this thing that happens when you get into these later stages of sleep called lymphatic flow. And what that essentially is like, think about like water just like washing over your brain at night. So the lymphatic system comes from the spinal cord, and then it washes over the brain, and it removes toxins and broken DNA, and it removes this protein called beta amyloid. I hope I'm saying that right. And this is a protein that's associated with Alzheimer's and dementia. So when we go into these beta wave sleep patterns, these later sleep patterns, the housekeeping of the body just kind of naturally washes over and cleans out our brain essentially.
Without that.
Right, without that, these proteins start to increase, right?
Build up.
Yeah. And then the other thing that it does, if you're not getting enough sleep, is it really impairs your memory and your cognition. So when we go into that REM sleep, which we'll talk about, all of the emotional experiences, all of the memories, everything that we learned cognitively that day before, it's almost like it's on a thumb drive. And when you get into that REM sleep, it is taken from the thumb drive and put into your long-term file for permanent learning.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting.
It's important. Should we talk about the stages of sleep?
That's really interesting because
yeah,
when you think about it, one of the things that one of the reasons why you're deprived of sleep would be like when you're a student or you're in grad school. So the times when you're wanting to learn and memorize and capture, like cramming for the test, like when you want to hold information the most, are some of the times when you just
Or you think
don't
about the
know.
way they treat like med students and
Ooh.
residents, it's like horrifying to me.
Horrifying, yeah.
Because it's not even, and we'll get into circadian rhythm a little bit, but it's not even just the amount of time you're sleeping, because they've done all these studies on shift workers, right?
Gotcha.
And talking about how sleeping in kind of increments like that affects you, and it affects you in the same way as sleep deprivation would, which it impacts your insulin levels, ultimately impacting your glucose levels, which that's going to lead to the etiology of diabetes. It's going to increase your risk for anything like cardiometabolic,
100%.
heart disease.
So one of the things that I have heard around this conversation are like the cycles, like the bad habit cycles. So keep going. What else?
So the stages of sleep.
Right.
So we're all familiar with REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, but then there's also non-REM sleep, and there's 4 stages of that. So you've got stage 1, which is your sleep onset. Stage 2 is this deeper sleep, and this is when they start to see these spindle patterns on an EEG. And then stage 3 and 4, you have deep sleep with these slow wave activity on the EEG, and then that's known as delta sleep. And then REM sleep begins approximately 90 minutes after you fall asleep, and it occurs about 4 to 5 times per night. So it's about 25% of your sleep time. And this is where, you know, you consolidate your memories, all of that information gets put into those long-term files. So the length of time that you're spending in each stage depends on your biological clock, your circadian rhythm, all of that.
Gotcha. All of a sudden I got a little creeped out. This is the side step. I got a little creeped out that so much happens when I'm sleeping and I don't know about it. I just got a little like creeped
Well,
out.
I know what you're, but I feel like
so much happens and I don't even know what's going on. For like 8 hours, I have no clue what's going on. I feel really
well, do you
vulnerable
ever think
that.
about, so this is wild, and I can't remember the exact, like, if this is a real statistic, but they say you eat like 100 spiders throughout your life because they crawl into your mouth when you sleep.
No.
Yeah.
Stop it. You're just making that up.
No, I swear.
You read that on a Cracker Jack box.
That's probably where it came from. But isn't that funny? But then when you think about the amount of your life that you spend sleeping, because there's that old saying that's like, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? Like YOLO, like let's live it up.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's not what we're talking about today, but like, you kind of do, like, there's a lot you miss out on.
Yeah.
In Twilight, the vampires didn't sleep. So they were all like super smart because they could just read all night.
But really they didn't know that we weren't assimilating as much as they'd been sleeping.
Well, they couldn't in this fictional world, but yeah.
All right, so that's very cool. So we have these stages of sleep. Go on.
Okay, so why do we care, right? Other than the fact that we know if we're not gonna be sleeping well, we're not gonna feel good. You know, if we're talking about getting healthier, a lot of people wanna lose weight. When you are sleep deprived, and in this example, they're talking about sleep deprivation as under 6 hours a night for this specific example. So I know other times they'll do it for like 4.5 hours, but your body increases ghrelin and then it decreases leptin. So we know ghrelin is that hormone that makes you hungry, and then leptin is the satiety hormone that tells you when to stop eating. So that's why, like, it makes total sense, right? If you're not getting your full amount of sleep, you're going to be hungrier because your body needs energy, right?
Yeah.
But then
And also I'm wondering if that's like an individual thing. Like I feel so dysregulated even at 7.5 or 7 hours of sleep.
Oh, it is. It's totally, well, it's funny because as I was doing research for this, it's definitely genetic, but there's a type of person, and what did they call them? It's a subcategory of super sleepers, and it's genetically predetermined, and they are just basically super efficient sleepers, and they can get 4 to 6 hours a night. So there are people who, I'm not sure how much of the population that is, but there are people who can function on that. Like there's one person I'm thinking of who's kind of like a celebrity who says, oh, I only get this much a night. But you know, I think for a lot of people that say that, there's like an element of like toxic productivity involved where they're kind of giving themselves a pat on the back for that, and it's not always a sustainable thing.
Less sustainable, healthy. Thing.
So if you are sleep deprived, right, and you're
Okay.
still kind of trying to lose weight or make these strides towards your healthy goals, if you do diet, so if you are in a calorie deficit or if you are doing an extreme type of exercise, you're not going to burn fat. You're more likely to be burning lean muscle mass, which again makes sense because that's an adaptive and protective
Strategy.
evolutionary mechanism.
Yeah.
Because if you're not getting enough sleep, your body thinks that you're in a state of stress and alarm, so it's going to want to hold on to the fat cells, so more likely to lean or to burn lean muscle.
So it's counterproductive.
It's counterproductive. And then what's more interesting to me, and for, you know, I mean, like, it's fine if that's your goal to want to lose weight, but what sleep deprivation does to your insulin and glucose levels.
Ooh, yeah.
So what they've done is they've taken, you know, just like healthy people, and they've taken adiposits from their fat cells, so from their subcutaneous fat, which is that outside fat. It's not that visceral fat that hugs your organs, so it's the fat that you could like pinch on your stomach. And they've provoked it with glucose and looked at the insulin response, and the insulin is what gets the glucose into your cells. Okay. And what they found is that, you know, the response was normal, but if they took the same individuals and sleep deprived them to 4.5 hours, they had a 3-fold increase in insulin when their fat cells were manipulated with the glucose. And so insulin is that fat storing hormone.
So you actually store more fat should you be sleep deprived. Your body
Well, it's more that your body's not going to handle glucose as well.
Okay.
So your body's not going to handle glucose as well, which will, you know, can lead to metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance, but then also cardiovascular disease, right? So there's all this, it's a ripple effect that starts to happen.
And that's like that cycle that I feel like.
It totally is a cycle,
It's
right?
like I kicked a wheel and I'm just like on a roller coaster ride that I can't control. You know, like I don't eat right, I don't feel right, I can't think right.
And then back to sort of the immune response when we're sleep deprived, you know, this killer cells that we talked about, you know, kind of killing like cancer cells, they also are able to identify viruses and bacteria, right? So so it really does impact your immune system, and it decreases serotonin. So for those of us, especially who are already genetically or just, you know, because of environment susceptible to anxiety and depression. I mean, like none of this is like groundbreaking. Everybody knows this, right? Like,
no, but you know, you have to think it through once in a while. You have to remind yourself, and it can be really motivating to see the science behind some of these quote wives' tale or quote you know, good advice things. We're like throw out all these good advice statements of what we should do, but when you start looking at the science behind it, you're like, oh, that's why. And it's like, if you want to care about your body for your body, then some of these things we have to take a little more seriously. And I just know how easy it is to get sloppy.
Totally.
It's super easy to get sloppy about your daily habits.
Do you want to talk about some of like the causes of insomnia? Sure. Okay. So hormonal, right? So when women go through menopause and when they're in perimenopause, progesterone is that first hormone that is going to decrease, and progesterone goes into the GABA receptors of the brain. So that is what makes people feel calm. It's also where Xanax goes. We're going to pop a Xanax. So it's so interesting because even years before someone loses their period, they'll start to complain about insomnia, and it becomes a ripple effect because then when you don't get sleep, your stress in your body is going to increase, more hot flashes, more night sweats. It's going to be harder to sleep then, right? So like it could be hormones, infections, especially a lot of people, you know, who have undiagnosed Lyme disease or kind of co-occurring infections. Chronic stress, like we could have a whole podcast on this because so many of us struggle with chronic stress, and you can do, functional medicine does saliva, I believe, there's saliva panels, and it will measure your cortisol throughout the day. And what you want to see is kind of this peak in the morning and then gradually goes down at night. But if someone has dysregulated cortisol levels, what theirs will look almost opposite. I guess there's different ways it can look. It can have a dip in the middle of the day, or it can be low in the morning, but sometimes it has this inverse effect where it goes up at night. And then these are the people who are like so wired at night, right?
Kind of like Sita.
Kind of like our new
little
puppy.
puppy goes like zonkers.
I know.
At like 8 p.m. she just gets like.
She needs some ashwagandha or some sort of adaptogen blend to help with her adrenals. Yeah.
Something.
So environmental toxins, people who are allergic to their animals and sleep in bed with their animals.
Well, you know, some of that, because interesting, our book recommendation for the Seeker and Sages for the month of January is Breath by James Nestor. And like the quality of breathing is so important, and even movement, like up and down the spine, to bring the fluids up the spine so that the right blood chemistry is in the brain for that brain wash during the day. And then the disrupted breathing that can cause like interruptions in your sleep cycles.
Does he talk about sleeping with tape over your mouth?
100%. He's a big mouth taper, and a lot of people are doing it.
I know.
I know.
I haven't tried it yet.
I haven't tried it, but I have become much more conscious about, because I'm a mouth breather, like generations back on both sides of the family, it's just like mouth breathing. Like I've become much more conscious about closing my lips.
I think it's bad for your teeth too.
It's bad for the shape of your jaw and your teeth. It's bad for like everything. And his book is so compelling about the science. And they did an actual experiment with him and another gentleman where they went, I don't know, 10 or 20 days mouth breathing only, and 10, 20 days nose breathing.
I'm sorry. How did they? There's no.
I'm serious. They exercised and everything, and they took panels across everything. So
they plug their nose.
Yeah. And so anyway, that's a side story. But I think that when you mentioned allergens in the air, one thing that I noticed when I put this air purifier in the bedroom is that I slept sounder. And I think some of those subtle things, you think, oh, I'm sleeping, but like when you mention the stages of sleep, you don't know what stage you're in.
Oh no, you could be in very inefficient sleep.
100.
And REM sleep is where you dream. I should say that.
Interesting.
Right? I think I'm getting that right.
Yeah. But interesting, because I hadn't remembered my dreams for so long, and then I've started to remember them again.
Yeah, most of your
really
dreaming.
The air purifier was huge for me. So very interesting. So many things. So we didn't talk that much about insomnia. Do you have anything about it?
Well, I mean,
So you mentioned hormones, stress.
If you could have, I mean, if you have sleep allergies, like an
sleep
actual,
apnea, like legit. Yeah.
I mean, if we talk about good sleep hygiene.
Let's talk about good sleep hygiene.
Because that's a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah, and we have like, this is a bite-sized share.
Yeah. And like, I feel like none of this is super groundbreaking, but it is important. So even if it feels a little basic.
Yeah. I mean, here's what would be so radical is, instead of having a New Year's resolution of like losing weight or saving the world from something or another, like just sleep better. Like have a resolution that you're gonna have these really great sleep habits, and you're gonna honor that and respect that and prioritize that. And then with better sleep, see how many of the other things in your life just start to.
I just feel like sleep is a spiritual experience.
Oh, so good.
It's
and that
so
was one
good.
of that. If you ask me like one tip, I think my sleep changed when I started loving, like I bought nicer sheets and I started loving climbing into bed.
Well, and some of the basic things, right? Like that we'll talk about, and everyone's heard this, the bed is only for sleeping and sex.
Yes.
Don't work in your room. Light canceling, because light is everything, and that's the other thing that
light's everything.
Light is everything, but it can also, you can reverse that, right? So at night, first of all, turn off your electronics an hour before bed so that you're not getting exposed to the blue light, but then have the light canceling shades and windows. But then throughout the day, if you're able to get up and expose yourself to sunlight in the morning, it's gonna naturally suppress the melatonin, increase your serotonin, and that's a really good hack for getting your circadian rhythms back in swing. So a lot of people will do these like circadian walks in the morning, but we're just, first thing in the morning, get outside, expose yourself to sunlight, it makes
have to
a
wait for the
huge
sun to come
difference.
up.
I know, it's so hard around here. But even if you do in the middle of the day, like literally 15 minutes just walking outside.
Yeah, and I think too, like your best attempt, like a conscious awareness.
Mhm.
I'm outside and in the sun, lift your face up, like recognize it.
Mhm.
That can make a difference.
And then getting back to you saying loving,
Yeah, loving climbing into bed. So
right,
lucky,
so
this bed is so
can you
comfortable.
make it like a ritual, right? You know, like lavender essential oils, meditating or listening to some music that balances out your right and left hemisphere.
Or the Hertz music.
Totally. If you are going to exercise at night, try to do it within before 2 to 3 hours before bed, but you can always do like gentle stretching and stuff is super.
Legs up the wall.
Legs
is
up the wall is
probably
great.
the best before bedtime pose.
Only go to bed if you're sleepy, which I know is gonna be, and this one is always, so you and I have always differed on this because what sleep experts say, so when I was growing up and I could never sleep, my mom would say, just lie there and pretend.
I did. Like act as if you're sleeping.
She's like, I don't sleep either, just pretend, just lie there.
Close your eyes. Like, well, that's my insomnia rule.
Yes,
the middle of the
but
night
that's
when I
not
can't
what
sleep.
sleep experts say.
What does sleep experts say you do in the middle of the night when you can't
Well,
sleep?
so this is so funny because I remember when I had a psychiatrist one time who I think I told them that I wasn't sleeping and she said, well, what do you do when you don't sleep? And I said, well, I lay there and pretend. And she was like, oh, she like the whatever reaction. She was like, that's not what you do.
Oh my goodness.
She was like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get out of bed, leave the bedroom. So this is after if you're trying, if you cannot fall asleep after 20 to 30 minutes, you leave the bedroom, you do not eat, you do not go on the technology or do anything like that, which I'll tell you what the psychiatrist said to me like years ago. This was a long time ago, so I don't know if meditation was as mainstream, but she said you should sit in a corner in dim lighting and read a newspaper or something boring. Okay, I wouldn't recommend that. I think that now just leaving your bedroom, breathing, finding a little spot to meditate. Yeah, but it was funny. She was like, oh, you know nothing. I was like, well, that's why I'm asking you.
Whoa.
But
Well,
yeah,
so hostile.
You're not supposed
I
to.
mean,
You're not supposed to lie
it's
in bed
always the mother's
and
fault.
thrash around. Well, this is true. Yeah. No, she was great. She was a she was good. She was just had that grumpy edge. But not lying in bed for an extended period of time, just like.
Well, I'll just tell you my experience. I lie in bed and act as if because I feel like my body stays relaxed and I get pseudo sleep.
But
Like,
you
sometimes
might
my
not
mind
be
is active, but
you might not actually be much longer than 20 to 30 minutes.
that could be the case.
You know, so that's if someone's like really struggling.
Can we say find what works for you?
Find what works for you always. That goes without saying.
Okay.
Doing something that's uplifting before bed. So I'll tell you what I do. Some of the ideas are, you know, saying a prayer, a bath, mantra. I love burning Palo Santo, and I love taking coconut oil and an essential oil. And I'll do this like Thai stomach massage that I learned. Maybe I should do a video on it sometime.
That'd be
But
great.
it's really good for kind of massaging through your digestive tract. They also don't recommend eating a huge meal before bed, kind of goes without saying. But I love that ritual and just to play soft music.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky because I'm single, so
You live alone.
I live alone, which I don't always feel lucky.
I know, but look at how.
But I'm trying to look at the pros. I have the luxury of not having, a big hunk of man.
Or 2 kids, or a
kids.
puppy, or a 12-month-old puppy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have more tips?
So
Should we review the tips?
alcohol.
Ooh, no,
Alcohol's
yeah.
the only thing that I didn't touch on. It might help people get to sleep, but they're really never gonna get into that stage 3, 4 deep sleep with that high amplitude of the spindle fibers that allow them to have that increase in lymphatic flush.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
I just don't think there's even any amount of alcohol that isn't going to disrupt your sleep. Like even the one glass theory or the just in moderation theory. And what really was telling to me, because this is many years ago, but for a while I used a sleep app. And unfortunately, it was one that you kept in your bed because how else would it monitor your sleep? But it graphed your sleep every night through the different cycles. And it was like night and day, whether I had a glass of wine before bed or not, night and day. And it just was such a strong, powerful visual to see that difference. And really, there didn't seem to be a sip that didn't make a difference. Like it's just.
Well, that's what's interesting because it's like you could still feel like, yeah, I slept fine, I got this many hours,
100%.
but if you're not being, it's about being an efficient sleeper.
And an efficient sleeper so that you don't have low-grade grumpiness, so that you don't have dysregulated.
So that your
blood sugar
inflammation
level,
is down, your immune
inflammation
system
markers.
is stronger.
Yeah. And so like, wow, this is why it's such like the first pillar of health, the most important pillar of your health, because it does impact.
It's technically not the first pillar, but it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we talked about light, right?
We did.
And then if you have to pee a lot throughout the night, reduce your fluid intake. It's a very like
a few hours before bedtime.
Yeah.
Just drink in the morning up until about, 4 or 5.
And then really trying to be consistent with your sleep schedule, which I know is easier for some of us depending on our lifestyle than others.
Yeah.
I
know when I have events into the evening, or if we do something social, if I'm not like literally home by 9:30, it's just, it throws the whole routine out. So, because I can't come home at 9:30 and then go to bed at 10.
No, you have to wind
I have to
down.
wind down.
Yeah.
Did we get a lot?
I don't know. I feel like I talked kind of fast, but I like when my podcasts move along kind of snappy. I don't have all day to listen to us to ramble on about sleep.
What do you think about naps, Leah?
I'm a big fan of naps. There is a kind of threshold for how much is going to be effective. So I think they say like 60 minutes. So if you do 90 minutes, you'll get a full REM cycle. But that's not necessarily true because it takes everyone a different.
Okay, but I am going to tell you this, and this was really helpful for me, that 1.5 hour increments. So when you look in 1.5 hour increments, it's helpful to wake up at the end of one of those 1.5 hour increments. So they're saying like either 7.5 hours or 9 hours.
Well, that's what that app did, is that it could detect, I don't know how accurate it was, but it could detect when you were coming out of your REM sleep, and then it would wake you up. So you would give it a range for a time, like an alarm clock in the morning.
But I think that that's interesting, and that was helpful for my habit. To like do that 7.5 hours and be like satisfied, or else just sleep until 9.
Yeah, but I guess that depends on your body though, because if it's taking you 2 hours, it could take 2 hours to go into REM.
True.
And 8 hours,
cycle.
But I mean, it's a good.
But the thought that there's a point in the cycle where it's optimal to wake up.
Sure. I'm a big fan of naps though.
But naps you wouldn't nap for 1.5 hours. That would be.
No, that would be too much, I think.
Maybe 20 minutes? What's the?
I don't know.
Okay, well, that's your homework.
Okay,
episode 2 coming up, the follow-up coming up, or throw your ideas down in the comments. And we can like hash it out.
I also think the nap thing, really focusing on keeping your blood sugar stable throughout the day so that you're not getting those sugar crashes.
That's good advice.
Like we could have a podcast on blood sugar stabilization.
Let's do it.
Because I'm pretty passionate about that one.
Yeah. Well, I think I just think that we have oversimplified relationships with our bodies in terms of health. And that some of these conversations can really help us look at things a second time and appreciate like how that fits into our whole body wellness and health lifestyle. All right.
Yeah.
I feel like you're done.
I'm ready to wrap. We've got yoga coming up.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sayonara. Namaste, Seekers and Sages. Thank you so much for joining us. And like, comment, share. Thanks for following.
Bye.
Bye.